Welcome to the podcast ABCs of Parenting Adult Children. Please join us as we discuss parenting adult children and the unique struggles that it comes along with.
Hello and welcome to ABCs of Parenting Adult Children. My name is James Moffitt and I'll be your host. Today we have a special guest speaker, Melissa Hepner. Is that how you say your name?
Yes.
Melissa Hepner, thank you for being here. And do me a favor and introduce yourself to the listening audience.
Hello, I'm Malisa. I am born and raised in Oklahoma. I'm a therapist here, and I'm an author, a public speaker, and I have a podcast called Emotionally Unavailable.
Emotionally unavailable, huh? That sounds interesting.
It can be, yeah, it's pretty interesting.
I'll have to check that out. You said you're an author?
I am, yeah. I published my own story. It's called Owning My Crazy. It released, 2020, 2021. I don't remember now. And I released a revamped, kind of like added on a couple of things to the end last year, just because I wanted to release it to a wider market. But everybody buys off Amazon anyway, so I wasted my time with that. But yeah.
Do you have a copy of the book that you can show us?
Not on me. It's been a minute since I've even done anything with that book, if I'm being 100%
No.
honest.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But what's it called?
Owning My Crazy, Learning to Overcome Trauma.
Okay. And you can get that on Amazon?
Yep. Or
all right.
Barnes & Noble. But Amazon, just go to Amazon. We all shop there anyway.
Yeah, just shoot me an email later with the ISBN number and where we can, what the name of it is and all that, and I'll put it on my website.
Okay, cool.
So I'm looking at your podcast bio. It says the episode could explore trauma, recovery, and personal growth from a mental health perspective in the context of parenting and adult children. So I'm just going to say my doctor said that I would be okay. He just didn't say when. I actually said that to a psychologist. I worked for Delta Airlines back in 1988 and 1999 before the world was supposed to end on 2000, right? And I did end user support, and I got a help desk ticket from the psychologist. And I didn't even know Delta Airlines had psychologists. And so she was in a cubicle, like she had it wasn't quite a private office, but she had a large cubicle, it was kind of private. And I was looking at her computer problem, whatever it was, her laptop. And I noticed all her degrees and stuff on the back wall. And I was like, wow, you're a psychologist? She says, yeah. I said, I had no idea Delta hired psychologists. And she said, so she went in and she told me the psychology of the colors and the airplane cabin itself, the coloring, the lighting, the aesthetics of the chairs, the fabric, everything to do with.
She did experience design through psychology.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed. And speaking of Delta Airlines, they have a phenomenal training center, and pilots from all across the world come over there or come to Atlanta, Georgia to train in their simulators.
Is that their hub, Atlanta?
Yes. And they have a phenomenal safety record. Well, up until recently, apparently. But anyway, so much for Delta Airlines and aircraft. Back to, and I wanted to continue the story. I did that in front of her, and her eyebrow raised just a little bit. She kept a straight face. She didn't really respond to me, and she was like, "Oh, really?" Oh. And so I solved the problem. I never got another trouble ticket from that lady ever after that incident.
You know what, James? You're okay. You're okay. And you just stay in there, babe.
It was pretty funny. All right, so talk to us. Tell us your story.
Well, I survived basically a really extensive history of childhood trauma, and then spent my entire adult life trying to figure that out. And in the midst of all of that, had 3 children of my own. So any of kind of the shame and pain of healing was right in the midst of trying to learn how to raise kids to be not traumatized, but, loved, whole, connected, successful, whatever it is that we're trying to do with our kids, right? And
Right.
I think that really led me to the darkest place, just because that's where being a mom was the only thing I really cared about being good at, and I wanted to do it better than what my parents had done, which truly isn't hard to beat, but I mean, a lot better. I wanted to give them all the things that I really grew up just begging for internally, knowing that you can't, ask addict parents for those things. But I think I was so deep in my shame because I felt like I wasn't meeting up to the expectations that I had set for myself as a parent. And working through that shame has fundamentally changed my life. It's made me a very good therapist, because what I recognize is that we all really do carry the same narratives from our childhood. So now I'm trying really hard with a 22-year-old child who's going to turn 18 this week and a 10-year-old. I know that there's nothing that I can do to reverse some of the decisions I've made in parenting, but I'm just working really hard to go forward with the right tools and the right expectations.
Right. So you said your parents were addicts?
Yes. My dad died when I was 15 of a morphine overdose. And then my
Oh
mom
no.
died when I was almost 22 and pregnant with my first son.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
I know that was very traumatic for you. You said you were 15
I was
or you're
15 when my
22.
dad died. Yep.
Right. And so then you were 22 when your mother passed. Yeah, that's difficult to process.
Well, and being pregnant when my mom died was just really, I don't think I really took the time to grieve that loss, because I mean, I was like throwing up for morning sickness during the end, So
Sure.
she died of complications related to cirrhosis and Hep C, and it was a 3-week ordeal in the hospital. And she was actually an incarcerated individual through our state prison system whenever that happened. So it was just one trauma after the other during those few weeks. And then she was gone, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I got to be a mom. And first, I was having some complications with the pregnancy. So I kind of just went into almost a cognitive dissonance just to, get through that first trimester. And then, I bought a house during that time, all kinds of stuff. And I was just a kid. I mean, I know we have so many expectations for 22-year-olds, and I thought I was grown because, my family all had kids like in their teens. So I was like, oh, I'm grown. I was married. I had,
Right.
I was like, oh, I did it right. But, 22 is a baby. Sorry.
Well, they say that while you're physically 18 years old, that you're now an adult, but honestly, from 18 to 26 is when the temporal lobe is actually fully developed. So from 18 to 26, you're physically adult, but mentally you're not fully developed yet. And so,
right.
I remember looking back when I was in my, 20 to 30, between 20 and 30, I was a dumpster fire. And
weren't we all?
It's a miracle. It's a miracle of God that I didn't kill myself, somebody else, or wind up in prison, literally. Just by the grace of God that I'm actually sitting here at 63 talking to you.
Yeah, I just remember thinking like, okay, every year I get closer to 25, the more I realize I don't know. And then after 25, I was like, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know anything.
Well, I'm going to surprise you and tell you that even at 63, older you get and the more wisdom you gain, the more you realize you just didn't know shit.
I believe it. I'm almost 45, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I know nothing for certain except for that I'm worthy and valuable and worthy of love and belonging no matter what. That's it. That's all I know for certain.
Right. Well, the thing about parenting is you don't get a manual. They pat you on the head, they hand you the baby, assuming that the baby is healthy enough to leave the hospital. They hand you the baby, pat you on the head, wish you luck, and then shove you out on the street. And then you're like, well, what do I do now? And you go through you go through colic, and you go through childhood diseases and sicknesses. And if you're lucky, you have parents still that are in your life, and you can kind of depend on them as a support system, or grandparents or uncles or aunts or whatever. And we as parents, we parent our children like our parents parented us. That is what's that's hard baked into our psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister and I were adopted in a German orphanage back when we were 1 and 2 years old, way back when in 1959 and 1961, 1962. And they brought us to the States. My adoptive parents certainly gave us a much better life than we would have had if we stayed in an orphanage. And I'm very, very thankful for that. However, neither one of my parents, my adoptive parents, neither one of them understood what it meant to demonstrate love to their children.
Mm-hmm.
They mastered in the art of providing for all our physical needs, but they were emotionally abusive, physically abusive. My dad was emotionally unavailable, and the only emotion I ever got out of him was anger or rage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a very interesting childhood, and we were told to, when we went to out in public, went to our relatives and stuff, we'd sit on the couch, and we were told that we were to be seen but not heard, and
Absolutely.
we were
Every one
not
of us were told that
we were
exact same
not we
thing.
were not to speak to anybody unless spoken to.
Mm-hmm.
God forbid,
Well,
don't you dare
yeah,
get up and
because
run
you're a
around.
direct extension and reflection of them. So if you
Right,
do anything to bring shame to them, mm-mm.
right. And so I recognized when my wife and I got married 34 years ago, and I recognized that um, I think the saving grace for me was that I was a Christian, am a Christian, not was a Christian. Back then I was a Christian. I still am. And I knew that I had to break that generational curse.
Mm-hmm.
I could not carry forward the rage, the anger, the abuse, physical, emotional, psychological abuse that my sister and I endured. There were times that, I'll just say that I started listening to this Christian psychologist named James Dobson. He was kind of my parenting guide, and
Yeah, I remember that guy.
he was very wise. He was a Christian, and he integrated a lot of his faith in his parenting. And so I tried to learn as much as I could from him. Obviously, to be honest, there were times that I reacted like my dad would have reacted when my kids were being rebellious or up in my face, or I caught myself on several occasions reacting in a way that was not becoming of a loving father. And I had to learn how to go back later on and apologize for my actions and my thoughts and my sayings or my words, right? And so yeah, we're not alone. You and I are not the only parents that have endured trauma in some shape, form, or fashion, right? Because we're
Right.
imperfect people as parents, as individuals. You know, we're imperfect people, and we all need help. You know, and so that's what this podcast is all about: is to help parents learn how to break the generational curse of abuse in their childhood. That's not all this podcast is about, but that's one of the many facets of this podcast. And we have a parenting support group on Facebook. We started it in 2015 when our kids were still teenagers. Two of them were still
Oh,
teenagers.
that's
And
cool.
yeah, so I told my wife, I said, hey, let's start a podcast, or not a podcast, a Facebook support group, and let's see if anybody else is having problems. And lo and behold, we're not alone. We started out
Right.
with 10 members. Now we got 1.3 thousand members, and so I started this podcast back in May of 2023, and I thought I want to do the podcast in conjunction with the support group on Facebook so that people would have something that they could listen to, while they're going around about their business during the day, whether it's taking kids to events or going to work or driving to the laundromat or whatever it is people are doing. I want them to have something that they can just plug in and listen to. And so I
Mm-hmm.
want it to supplement what they're getting on Facebook. And the podcast has really taken off. We've I don't know, I guess I got like 5,700 downloads since May of 2023. And so I switched podcast hosts from Spotify over to Activate FM because it's supposed to be the second best podcast host out there, and my hope is that it's going to give my podcast
More
a boost
visibility.
in
Yeah.
exposure and visibility. Yeah. Anyway, away from me and back to you.
I kind of
What do you?
think that like when you said they don't give you a manual, I'm like, yeah, but because of the way like the silent generation and older really robbed us of a voice because compliance ruled all. They just, like you said, to be seen and not heard. Don't bring shame to the family name.
Right.
These people didn't really have identities outside of their family. And so you were their everything, especially mothers who stayed home with their children. You were their everything in terms of how they got any sort of validation. So because we were robbed of our voice, I mean, even like the forcing of hugs with family members, just because that's what's supposed to be done. Like, I don't do that. We have to have consent in my family. Like, if you don't want to hug someone, you don't have to, like, that's your body. I really preach bodily autonomy because I was in so many different situations growing up where bad things were happening and I didn't want to make the other person feel uncomfortable, because that's what I was taught, was to put my comfort to the side and make strangers or grandmas or aunts or uncles feel comfortable. So when you do that and you turn off to your own internal voice, then you question everything. Choice is hard because it feels like you could make the wrong choice and you don't know how to make choices because you haven't been guided through that. You've been guided
Right.
through how to be compliant. So even if we were given a manual, I think we'd all still be freaking out and not really knowing what to do with it. Like, should I trust the manual? Am I doing it the way the manual said? I mean, there's just all that internal conflict because we weren't taught how to lean into intuition or confidence even. I mean, how can you cultivate confidence in somebody that you're criticizing day in and day out over their hair or clothes or makeup or the way they solve a math problem or don't solve the math problem? All these things rob us of our ability to cultivate self-love, self-acceptance, joy, and peace in our adult lives.
I remember that my parents, their model for a good, positive child was primarily performance based. Mm-hmm. And if you performed according to the boundaries that they set around you, the guardrails they set around you, be seen, not heard, don't speak unless you're spoken to, make good grades, don't be tardy at school, don't take drugs, don't drink, all these do's that you're supposed to do and all the don'ts you're not supposed to do. And if you met those expectations, then you were a good person.
Right. Then you're worthy of my love and affection.
Right. And God forbid if you screw up and you make mistakes, intentionally or not intentionally. Like my mother was a non-practicing Catholic. In other words, she was raised in the Catholic Church in Austria. And I remember when my dad was in Vietnam, in Terrell, Texas, back when Martin Luther King got killed, back in that era. I remember that she went to this Catholic chapel that was open 24/7, and she went in and prayed, lit candles, and all this kind of stuff. And we were just kids at that time. We were like 7, 8 years old, whatever. And we kind of understood what she was doing, and we didn't really read anything into that. But anyway, where was I going with that? My parents were, like I said, they were performance based. Non-practicing Catholic. So anyway, when I got into my teenage years, I responded to their iron fist methodology of raising us, demonstrating zero love, all anger, and abuse and all this kind of stuff. I responded by being insolent and, resisting. I was, what's the word I'm looking for?
Defiant?
Huh? Defiant. There you go. That's the word. I was defiant.
You were the black sheep and your sister was the golden child.
No, she resisted worse than I did. She was really defiant.
Than you or older?
No, she was 1 year older.
Really? Oldest daughter, boy, they take the brunt.
No, she was 2 years older than me. I was born in 1961. She was born in 1959. She was 2 years older than me. So my mother set me down with a big, thick Catholic family Bible, fully illustrated with all these pictures and stuff. And she says, I want you to read this Bible front and back. She reverted back to her childhood. I guess that's what her parents made her do.
Right.
And said, I want you to.
It'll get you.
So I've read the Bible in my, adolescent years multiple times. And I became a Christian after I turned 17, 18 years old. And so I've studied it after that, a different translation and all that. Anyway, so she sat down on a piece of paper and she drew a Y. And on that piece of paper, the left portion of the Y was good and the right portion was bad. And the little stick going up to the Y was the road of life. And she taught me that if you're on the road of life and you do good things, you do what you're told, and you're a good boy, then you're going to go to heaven, and you're going to reap the benefits of being a good boy and a young man, right? But if you do bad things and you're disobedient and you don't do what you're supposed to do, blah blah blah, then you're a bad boy and a bad young man, and you're going to go to hell. So that was my perception of
Yeah, my grandma
myself.
said that stuff too.
My self-worth was, the only way to get to heaven is to meet the requirements of being good, right?
100% compliance. Yep.
Yeah. And none of us can do that, right? And you look at the Old Testament, the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the religious leaders of the day before Jesus, in the years of Moses and all the minor and major prophets, they had the letter of the law. They had the Old Testament law, and you had to, in order to be deemed worthy of God's grace or God's love, you had to meet all of these requirements. Well, obviously, we screwed up horribly because Jesus had to die on the cross, and grace came into being, and thankfully now we're not under the Old Testament law; we're under grace. So anyway, but yeah, that's kind of the mentality I was raised under.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode. I want to take the time to introduce my new sponsors who are helping to underwrite the cost of producing this podcast. The first sponsor is Michael Evan Blair, trauma specialist and author. You can visit his website at blaircounselingandcoaching.com. That's BLAIR, counselingandcoaching.com. His book is When in Doubt, Spin It Out. ISBN is 979-834-289-6122. You can find this book on Amazon. My second sponsor is Jonathan Nall. He is a book author, and the name of the book is Final Approach, a moving memoir about balancing life and caregiving with love, loss, and resilience. His website is finalapproachbook.com. Common spelling, finalapproachbook.com. My third sponsor is Scott Yamamura. He's a book author. Financial Epiphany. Discover your ability to multiply money and reimagine your life. ISBN is 798-9913-85701. You can find this book on Amazon and many other book outlets. All three of these sponsors have episodes on ABCs of Parenting Adult Children. Be sure to check out their books or services, listen to the episodes, leave me a review. Now back to our featured episode.
Me too. I was primarily raised by my grandma, and my parents were kind of in and out. But I've grown to feel more compassion for their experiences, because I imagine that theirs must have been so much worse, because I don't believe that any parent just decides that they're going to continue to perpetuate those abuses or neglect.
Right.
And so I think they're doing a little better than what they got at the very least. But at the same time, I think you have to hold space for two different perspectives, which is your own and theirs. And mine matters more because it happened to me. You know what I mean? And I don't, like, my grandma's gone now too, but I'm glad that I haven't even attempted conversations like that with her in so many years before she died, because the one time I tried to bring up stuff from childhood, I mean, she never showed an ounce of remorse for any of it. And I can understand what that is now and forgive that, because I get who she was in those days of her life. But at the same time, again, I'm allowed to own what my experiences were.
Sure.
Being raised by somebody that I would call a narcissist, absolutely. And then having addict parents with their own set of issues in and out of my life and doing the things that they did. But now with my kids, I think the number one help that I've had in raising them is my understanding and this is in the last couple of years, but my own understanding of who I am and what my shame narratives are and what my core beliefs that were programmed into me, and learning to, disseminate between just old messaging and programming that was created by them
Right.
versus my own intuition and the self-trust that I've learned to cultivate. Because I can think of so many times in parenting decisions, and like my middle child was born to be a middle child and behaves very much like a middle child. And so for me, like, just constantly questioning, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? All because I hadn't learned to cultivate self-trust. Versus now, where I'm so solid in who I am and know very well who I am, that gives me the ability to relate to others on that same level, because I don't think we're all that different. Our wounds may have been created differently, but I think once you like scrape away some mud and dirt, you can see we're all kind of the same, like, really. And that's my hope, is that for future generations, that's what you and I and others like us are changing for them, is that we
Right.
can be emotionally available to ourselves and others, that we can cultivate the most self-trust and love within ourselves, because then you aren't relying on these children to provide you some sense of validation for the work that you've done to raise them. My big saying is, these babies didn't ask to be born. We did that.
Right.
We put them on
Right.
this earth. But I think the struggle with like parenting adult children is, now where does my responsibility stop? And I think I have found for like my kids that I had to work through that thing that really immature parents bestow upon us, which is like, I do this for you, you do this for me. And I just learned, like, that was the crux of so many issues. Like, the things you do to parent can't be in expectation of reciprocation. That child, it's a power imbalance. They're never going to be able to repay you, and you shouldn't ask them to. Now,
Right.
if it's a monetary exchange and you say, well, sure, I don't mind giving you some gas money, but I'm going to need you to do this, this, and this. That's an expectation set immediately. But what I find is all these parents that are overextended and pretty emotionally unavailable to themselves. They don't know what they need. They don't know how to ask for what they need. So they look to this child and they say, I'm going to love you in the way that I wish I could be loved. And then I'm going to build this contract in my mind that says, I'm going to do that. And then you're going to reciprocate. And then what? And that was the thing that I grew up with so much, is like, I was supposed to be in this eternal debt of gratitude. And I just don't think that that's the case. Like, I didn't ask to be born. And so, like, I'm here. Should I treat you with love, kindness, and respect? Sure I should. But otherwise, I don't owe you anything. So then now back to the parenting side of that. What do I owe you? Because I did choose to have you. I put you on the earth. I think that was where I really struggled, was, do I owe you like as much as I was told I owed, like, since I'm the parent? And that's been probably the messiest part to work through, is you can still hold boundaries with your children, whether they're adults or a 5-year-old. If you don't have the capacity to meet a need right then, you just be honest about that. Don't try to meet the need. It's just like any relationship. You have to hold some boundaries, and you have to make sure that you have the time, energy, or resources to meet the need. And if you continue to give from a place that's completely dry or empty, that's when the resentment and the tension starts to build up. So then you're expecting. These kids don't have the capacity to meet your needs. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, there's two things that you're talking about. One is emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And our baby boomer parents, well, I'm a baby boomer. I don't know what generation they were. They were the World War II generation, I guess.
Generation.
Yeah, the silent generation. Very abusive
generation.
They didn't have any emotional intelligence. Very little to speak of. And so when you're not in contact with who you are and who you are as a person, then it's very difficult for you to help somebody else, your child, much or whatever else. And then when you're talking about the dynamics of the relationship of the parent going, okay, well, I'm going to do this, that, and another for you, and I expect for you to reciprocate and provide my emotional needs, acceptance, love, whatever. And it's like you said, the child is not equipped to even understand any of that, right?
Right.
And so there's unreasonable expectations going on from the parent.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
I just remember, like, because my grandma was born in 1940 and I was born in 1980. So she was a pretty young grandma. And I was not her first grandchild. And I just remember this nonstop rhetoric of my lack of ability to complete the task that she has asked me to complete in the manner in which she asked for it to be completed was obviously me communicating to her that I do not love or value her or appreciate her. Like
right,
everything that we did was so personalized to her. And part
right,
of me understands that because as humans, like when you start to really dig down to who you are, you realize, yeah, okay, I create my own reality and this is my world and everybody else is just living with it, you know, like, and we're just all like living in our own world and kind of colliding with one another. But I certainly was not trying to communicate to her that I did not love, value, or respect her because I didn't know how to vacuum the way she wanted me to. You know what I
right,
mean? And that was
right,
like everything. Everything we did was either communicating love, respect, and value or the opposite of that, period. There was no in
right.
between. You either did the things that were pleasing and they meant that. When meanwhile, I'm just trying to like stop the lecturing and screaming and the other, you know, like I'll do whatever you say. I'm sorry I couldn't do that correctly.
Yeah, as a child, you're being as compliant as possible because you don't want a beating. You don't want another
Right.
tongue lashing. You don't want any
Huh?
abuse. And so you're like, Jesus, just give me a second. Let me see if I can figure this out. Right.
Right.
So,
Well, because it was so hypercritical all the time.
right. So if you can, try to look back at when you were transitioning from, when you're like 18 to 26 and you're transitioning from a childhood and an adolescent into being an adult. And I know you had a lot on your plate back then, but for the parents of adult children that are transitioning themselves, can you, from the perspective of somebody that experienced trauma from parents that were addicts and you transitioning and having a baby on the way, kind of describe what that was like?
Well, I would say probably overall, I just didn't have a faith in myself at all. Like that I could, with the first kid, actually, I was a little overly confident, but from like, I had my second one at 27 and the time in between there, well, again, I realized how little I actually knew about life because I thought that surviving childhood trauma meant I like was so resilient that I could just go and do and be and that it was all just going to happen naturally. And I just remember feeling really unsure of who I was and how to move in the world. And I didn't know how to advocate for myself in any way. I didn't know what my needs were or how to ask for them. And so I think if there had been any ability to communicate, I'm coming to terms with some of the things that happened and I need to discuss those and that been open to happen, that would have been really good. But also I think just I was still very much being criticized by my grandma at that age. And you're going to mess up as a mom, as a daughter, or whatever. Like whatever your role is, you're destined to be imperfect at that role. And so much of what we learn comes through these relationships. And so I think if I had had anybody in my life that was not being critical of me, because everyone in my life was emotionally unavailable.
Right.
So, even in-laws and whatever, they think they're well-meaning, but it's still a criticism. It's still this narrative like you're not enough, but you're also too much. You know what I mean? And I just always felt this neglect wound wide open of like, okay, I got the weight of the world on my shoulders to carry all by myself. And so like I have my 22-year-old, he actually moved out right after high school and had a 2-week attempt at college and decided now wasn't the right time. And I was like, hey, I did the exact same thing at his age. So I was like,
Right.
not going to tell him the things that were said to me at that age. So I was just like, yeah, dude, it's just not your time. Let your brain develop a little more. Let you make some decisions on your own for a little while. No big. And then this past summer, he moved back home. He asked if he could because he wanted to go back to school, and he knew that he is a person who cannot go work full time and handle the stress of paying bills and all of that and do school full time. And so I was like, of course, come home. Like that, I never asked you to move out. Like, yeah, I'm
Right.
glad you've had this experience, blah, blah, blah. So he's home, and it has been a very interesting dynamic to parent a 22-year-old, because it's very little advice or any of that, and more just an acceptance of who he is. But also it's really highlighted some of my wounding, because I had to like let go of this level of responsibility. Like, I'm not responsible for making sure you have dinner when you're 22 like, I still have a 10-year-old. I have to make her dinner. I don't have to make you dinner. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like things like that.
Sure.
But also just making sure that I'm coming from a place of, what I tell everybody is, every decision that you make needs to come from a place of love and compassion for yourself first. So you have to love yourself enough to set boundaries. You have to love and accept yourself enough to know when you need rest or when you need to stand up and advocate for yourself or someone else, and it's been, I think that was probably single-handedly the most eye-opening, was like acceptance of who he is as a person. I read this thing, I think just yesterday, that said, you are not like the creator of the masterpiece that is your child. Like, they are the creator of their own masterpiece, and you're just there to witness it. And
Right.
I'm sure I'm not saying that correctly at all, but I was like, that's so true, because I don't look at him and think you're the reason or I'm the reason. I just go, you're a human having a real human experience. And anything I do, as long as I make sure I'm not using a critical voice or leaning into my own fears or my own shame, I think that's been the real big key for us.
Good. I'm going to ask some of these questions, I guess.
Okay.
What strategies would you recommend for parents supporting a traumatized adult child?
Heal yourself first. Always. Go find this book. It's called The Finding Peace Workbook by a guy named Troy Love, who's an LCSW in, I think, Arizona. And deal with your own stuff. Because if you understand your own stuff, and it doesn't matter, like, again, sometimes we look at foster children or just super traumatized children in general, adopted. Maybe we're a teacher and we see these, kids with poor home lives. Whatever it is, we do a lot to separate ourselves from them and put ourselves in a us versus them kind of mentality, even if it's not in a negative sense. It's just like a, I can't relate to you because kind of thing. And the more you know yourself, the more you will realize we're all having the same experience here. The human experience is not that different from person to person. So if you know yourself really well, you're going to know exactly how to meet somebody where they are. But you can only meet people at your current level of healing. And we all have healing to do, specifically if you were raised in certain generations. Like, it sounds like you said you're a baby boomer. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So most of your generation didn't get it right. Like, that's what my parents were, and they were raised by the abusive people. And so
Right.
it's good for like people like us to go, okay, yeah, I can say like that wasn't good, and I can own some mistakes and whatever. I think the biggest difference is that's what we do, right? We go, hey,
Sure.
I messed up, and we can make repair, because no one ever asked us to be perfect. We do that because that's what our parents told us to be, is perfect.
Right.
But
Right.
otherwise, your kids, they don't need perfection. They need love, support, nurturing, and apologies and change. So like, those 3 steps to apologizing is like, you say the apology, you explain kind of why you think it went that way, and then what you're going to do differently in the future to not
Right.
repeat that mistake. That's where we're getting it right. But I think that if you know yourself really well and you uncover all of your wounding and all of your shame, you know how to meet anybody where they are at any time, whether it's your traumatized child or a youth group or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, I think transparency is very important. And I when my kids were growing up and as they became teenagers and were transitioning into adulthood, I tried to be transparent, and I tried to say, I told them I was, when I was your age, I was a dumpster fire, and I defined that, and I said, this is what I mean by being a dumpster fire, and all the things that I was dealing with internally, and how I was reacting to the world and stimulus. coming at me from all angles and all of that. So yeah, it's part of breaking the generational curse is to be transparent and to be real and authentic and own your garbage,
Yeah, absolutely.
and apologize for it. How can parents maintain their mental health while navigating their child's adversity? We're talking about self-care there, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think just living a very present life, mindful life, where you've learned how to not intellectualize all of your experiences, but you know how to actually experience a feeling so that you can process things. Because listen, your kids break your heart more than anyone on this earth. They do for lots of reasons. And, whether it's because they made fun of your outfit or hair or worse, you have to learn how to process those events. And I think, again, putting your needs as the priority, because you can't meet anybody else's needs if you're not taking care of yourself. But I think for me, presence and mindfulness, because I've had to learn to cultivate an attitude of gratitude for this moment and not worry about yesterday or tomorrow, but just live in this moment and understand I can be so grateful because all of my needs are met in this moment. And worrying about tomorrow doesn't serve any of us. And I think that's where we get so much wrong as parents. And God knows there's so many reasons for us to literally be so afraid. But if you lean into that fear, it will trigger all of your shame. And you will parent from a place that is very ugly instead of a place of love and acceptance of your child unconditionally. And our fear and our shame drives our behavior in a way that is so self-sabotaging. So if you think about the things that you do to children from that place, that's when you're hypercritical because you just want this baby to have a good life and have a better life than you, and all you want your sacrifices to be worth it or whatever. But again, if you're not understanding that this child has autonomy and they were never yours to create into anything to begin with, that wasn't really the purpose of having kids. And like, if you're still sitting around thinking that if you take care of your kids in childhood, they're going to take care of you in your old age, like, you're missing the mark, honey. You're missing the mark. So, like, really examine what your intentions are with the things that you're doing.
Can you discuss the role of spirituality and astrology in your personal growth journey?
Spirituality and astrology, for me, I think astrology, I feel direction from. And spirituality, I think, just makes me feel really connected to myself and a purpose, if that makes sense, a higher purpose. And like, to be really honest, like I was raised in a Christian home and was very Christian and have deconstructed from that faith. And there was like a middle ground where I didn't really know how to navigate without any sort of belief system. And then when I really got tapped into me, and then a belief that there is something higher than myself, I just don't feel a need to put any labels on it. It does give you steadier ground, if that makes sense, where you feel a little sturdier when you feel a divinity in the things that are happening around you. And so I think for me, that's what's really helped.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you like 5 minutes so you can do an elevator speech. You ever done one of those?
I haven't.
Okay. So just imagine you're on an elevator and you're going to a job interview, and the boss steps into the elevator and goes, "Okay, I'm heading from one meeting to the next. You got 5 minutes to sell yourself." So think of it as that, and let's just say you're on the elevator with some parents. So in 5 minutes, what would you tell the listening audience?
Oh, I would absolutely say go figure your stuff out. Go and heal yourself. If you have not done therapy or any sort of personal development, you're missing the mark 100% of the time. I promise you. Go fix yourself. Like, learn your wounds, learn your shame, learn the things that motivate your behavior. And then when you can meet yourself and come back to your own body, instead of living in your brain, overthinking all of the time, you can be present and you can love from a place that is so much more abundant than attempting to love from a place of scarcity and fear and shame.
Well, you did that in a minute and a half. That was pretty good.
Look at me. Hair flip.
Well, good job. And Melissa, I appreciate you being on the podcast. And to my listening audience, I'm going to say thank you for the privilege of your time. You can listen to this podcast on Activate FM. I changed from Spotify over to Activate FM, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Public Radio. I'm also going to upload the video version of this podcast episode to Rumble, RUMBLE. It's a conservative alternative to YouTube. All right. So our website is located at parentingadultchildren.org. That's parentingadultchildren.org. When you go to the website, you'll see my contact information. You can click on my email link and you can email me. There's a voicemail. You can click on the voicemail. There's a little icon that has a microphone like this one. And you can click on it and you can leave me a voicemail and I'll respond to you. You'll see an upcoming show schedule, all the different episodes that get released each month. And there's also a place to leave a review. At the very top, there's a review button that you can click on. And if you listen to any podcast episodes and you like them or you have suggestions or there are topics that are not being discussed that you would like discussed, leave a review. Like on Apple Podcasts, if you listen to a podcast episode, you can actually leave a review right there on Apple Podcasts, and I get those. I release a new episode every Friday morning at 8 a.m. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And again, Melissa, thank you for the privilege of your time and for spending time with me today and sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Please tune in next week for another episode of our podcast on parenting adult children.
If you are the parent, mentor, friend, or relative of a young adult in recovery, please listen closely for about 90 seconds. I have some very important information for you. The current treatment system has become a revolving door, relapse-ridden mess with well under a 20% success rate. It doesn't matter who's measuring it. My name is Richard Jones, and I have spent the better part of my 38-year career working with the families of young adults in recovery. Now, I am talking about young adults, 17 to 25, with substance abuse issues or trouble with the law. They may need rehab, they may be currently in treatment, or they may be finishing a detox program. They may be heading toward jail or being released soon. Most recovery programs are forced and sterile. They ignore your child's natural strengths and abilities and their biggest advantage, you. Now, the three biggest problems we can solve for your family right now. First, by accident or design, the system is built on a relapse model. It offers a Band-Aid that is designed to keep you coming back instead of killing the source of the relapse at its roots. Secondly, it's built on a model of guilt and shame in order to assign blame to you and your child instead of fixing the real problem. See, the system is financially abusive. Tens of thousands of dollars that will not guarantee one result, just the promise that you can try over and over again if you live long enough. Now, it's very important for you to understand, with the right kind of determined outcome support and a clear roadmap, you can get a relapse-proof recovery without humiliation, without guilt, or being financially abused. You can also start seeing results immediately. No more blind faith reliance on an indifferent, reluctant, or burnout practitioner. You can finally take advantage of a method that works with your young adult strengths and abilities. Let us show you the only lasting way to recovery instead of the same old failed methods that most treatment systems use without regard to result or to your family's future. If you are the type of family who will not take no for an answer, the kind of family who can't afford to lose someone they lose, please consider this: stopping the frustration and fighting right away. Exchanging embarrassment for pride and bragging, and saying no to being financially victimized with no promises whatsoever. If this sounds like the kind of recovery effort you and your young adult deserve, give us your name and best email address below for more information. You can also go to secondstarts.com, that's the number 2, NDSTARTS.com, and book a free 15-minute call. There is a better way for the people who care more.